All right, guys. Happy Thursday. You're listening to the Truth Hurts show here on the Oracle Broadcasting Network. This is your host, Charlie Giuliani. I'm going to pick up today with part two of what I started yesterday, talking about our media, wonderful media, how it's been hijacked, why it's been hijacked, how they're using it to keep us in the dark about what's really going on. The conspiracy for world government. You know, this whole show, this whole network is dedicated to exposing the grand conspiracy. There's so many aspects of it, though, that a lot of people think that, oh, you have so many conspiracy theories. No, there's one conspiracy. It's the conspiracy for world government. But because it's like an octopus with a multitude of tentacles that reach deep into every aspect of society. To cover it adequately, you need multitudes of shows like this or multitudes of books, so you can get a grasp on the immensity of it. We're not dealing with a bunch of conspiracies, though. It's all one conspiracy that's multifaceted. They've hijacked every avenue of society. You know, I had another show a week or two ago about, maybe 3 weeks ago, whatever, about education, how they hijacked education. That's another aspect of it. And today, again, we're talking about the media. But, to control the public, to make sure that the public never finds out about all the other scams they're pulling off, they have to hijack the media. They have to hijack the education system. They have to hijack religion. I've talked about that before. I'll have other shows on that as well. I'd argue that hijacking religion is even more important than hijacking the media and education. Perhaps more important than those two combined. Because most people, if they realize they can't trust the government, can't trust the education system, can't trust the media, they will look to their religious leaders and trust them. And that's why FEMA has struck up this little sweetheart deal with thousands, tens of thousands of priests, pastors, ministers, whatever, around the country, setting it up so that, when they introduce martial law under a national crisis, which they're planning, of course, they'll be able to call on these ministers to help quell the masses, to calm them down, and to convince them that they need to follow the government. I got a whole show coming up on this sometime, but they've actually told them to cite Romans 13. One of the most misquoted passages in the entire Bible. There's a lot of misquoted passages in the Bible, but Romans 13 is one of the favorites of organized religion and the government itself, because it seems to give the impression that we're to blindly submit and follow whatever the government tells us, that it's God's will, which of course is ridiculous. If you ask these same idiots whether they think that Hitler was a godly ordained government and that we should have listened to whatever Hitler says because it was God's will, they of course would answer no. But somehow, we're supposed to do whatever our government says. Unbelievable. Oh, anyway, our government's become more Nazi than the Nazi government. But that's okay. Just ask your local FEMA contracted pastor. He'll tell you that's there's no problem. Our government is godly. All right, guys, short break, and then we'll pick up with part two of how the elites hijack our media. Be right back. All right, guys. I'm so tired. I didn't sleep too good last night. I'm just going to end the show right here, so I'll catch you guys later. April Fools. Yeah, it's that day, the prankster day. I gotta make sure I harass my girlfriend later. Anyway, if anybody wants to call in the course of the broadcast, you get comments, questions, gripes, whatever, the number to do so is area code 512-904-8014. Again, that's 512-904-8014. All right, let's pick up where I left off yesterday. Just before the end of the show, I read a quote about how the elites began buying up newspapers around the country, consolidating their control over the printed press. They started off buying the big newspapers, And the logic was, whatever we print in the big papers, the little papers will follow suit. You know, they'll pick up our stories, and that's exactly what happened. And as time went on, then they started buying the smaller papers as well, consolidating their control even more. Anyway, I just got a message that I'm not being heard too clearly. I'm going to check my sound here to make sure. Oh, boy. I hit the wrong thing. What the heck did I do now? Gotta love it. Hold on here, folks. Give me 1 second. Everything indicates my sound is, all right, I just turned it up a little bit. I'm hoping that, that takes care of it. Anyway. All right. Hopefully my sound's coming in a little better there, folks. So anyway, yeah, I was talking, I had read this quote, about how the elites, J.P. Morgan particularly, you know, was buying off papers around the country, consolidating control. But you know, that's where the control of our media whipped into high gear. But it goes back even before that. The manipulation of our media actually long preceded 1917. But again, it wasn't as organized. It wasn't as coordinated. Nevertheless, its effects were serious enough for some to voice their concerns, sometimes quite graphically, especially those who actually worked in the media and had a conscience. Back then, such people did exist. For instance, in 1902, W.J. Gent, former editor of the American Fabian, published his book, Our Benevolent Feudalism, in which he quoted John Swinton, former editor, editorial page editor of the New York Times. You know, this quote has been all over the place and has been wrongly cited almost every time that it's used. It's a legitimate quote, but it's been attributed to all kinds of different people from all different periods of history, you know, the past 150 years. Some people attribute it to the 1930s, the 1940s, 50s, and a half a dozen different people. It's sad. It's sad because it's an excellent quote, but when it's wrongly cited, of course, it gives the skeptics fuel, you know, to criticize. So let's get it straight, you know, once and for all. I dug deep to finally, you know, correct this problem and find out where it actually did come from. It was originally, well, it was quoted, as I said, in this 1900 book, Our Benevolent Feudalism. But he was quoting from John Swinton. Some people correctly name the source, John Swinton. But again, they have him living in the 40s or 50s. No, it goes back to the 19th century. The 19th century. He was the former New York Times editor, but not from the 40s or 50s. Anyway, here's what he said. There's no such thing in America as an independent press unless it is out in the country towns. I am paid for keeping honest opinions out of the paper that I am connected with. Other editors are paid similar salaries for doing similar things. The business of a New York journalist is to distort the truth, lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread, or for about the same thing, his salary. We are tools for vassals of the rich men behind the scenes. We are jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our time, our talents, our lives, our possibilities are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes. Bravo. Very well put. But amazingly, this was written back in the 19th century, the latter part of the 19th century. How much worse is it today? This describes the situation today. but it was already that way back then. Again, not as coordinated, not as organized. It's gotten a lot worse, but it was already that way back then, guys. So, you could argue, rightly so, that there's really never been a period in this country's history where we've had a real, quote, free press. Never. It's gotten less free as time has gone on, but it's never been free. We've never been told the truth about anything. There's always been lies and cover-ups, and, you go back to Lincoln's assassination and the death of Zachary Taylor. We were lied to about that, and we're still lied to about it. Heck, they exhumed his body back in the early 90s, supposedly to silence the conspiracy theorists who suspected he was poisoned. And when it was uncovered that he was in fact poisoned, they found arsenic in his fingernails and in his hair. They lied and covered it up and buried him back and said, it's all set. We confirmed he wasn't murdered. When they saw that he was. Go get Michael Parenti's History's Mysteries. He brings all that out. He's an interesting guy. I got to get him on sometime. He's definitely a guest that will show up, unlike some of the other recent ones I've scheduled. He's a good guy. I've interviewed him several times before. He's actually a 9/11 truther, believe it or not. Unlike Chomsky, he's not afraid to come out and say it was an inside job. I was very impressed with the interview I did with him a couple years back, the last time. He said it himself. He said anybody who looks at the events of that day can clearly see they didn't unfold the way we were told. He says we have here, once again, another example of government criminal activity. They've done it so many times before. It's just the norm for them. So, I got to get him on again sometime. Interesting guy. All right, guys, I have another break coming in. So stick with us, and we'll be right back. All right, folks. We're back. Okay, suppression of information is one of the most important functions of our modern mainstream media. Like I said yesterday, sometimes they don't tell and don't need to tell necessarily outright lies. All they need to do is suppress the truth, just not mention it, and that will accomplish the purpose. Lying by omission. And for a good example of such omission or suppression, consider this. In June of 1991, Bilderbergers held their annual meeting for that year in Baden-Baden, Germany. During a speech given by David Rockefeller at this meeting, he made this statement. This is another famous quote a lot of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, but it's astonishing, and it does, in fact, tell us, it gives us an inside glimpse into how this monstrous system works. Rockefeller has made many interesting statements like this over the years. Of course, in his 2002 book, Memoirs, he bragged that, yes, me and my family have been engaged in a conspiracy for world government. We do meet privately with other elites around the world to sell out American sovereignty to the system. He boasted about it. Anyway, listen to what he said at this Bilderberger conference, 1991. He says, we are grateful to the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, and to many others whose directives have aided our meetings and respected our promise of discretion for almost 40 years, referring back to the founding of the Bilderbergers in May of 1954. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries. So, there we go. He's thanking the media for keeping their mouths shut. Thanks for not saying anything. If it weren't for you, being compliant, keeping your mouth shut, we wouldn't have made this great progress toward global tyranny that we've been advancing. Unbelievable. There you have it, folks. Anyway, high-ranking media representatives are actually bound by an oath of secrecy regarding what goes on, folks, at Bilderberger meetings. It's called the Promise of Discretion. Paul Geiget of the Wall Street Journal, himself a Bilderberg member, attended the 1996 Bilderberger conference near Toronto, Canada, and when asked to comment about the happenings at this conference, listen to what he said. Quote, "The rules of the conference, which we all adhere to, are that we don't talk about what is said. It is all off the record. The fact that I attend is no secret." That's the only secret, he says, that we're not keeping. We tell you who attends, and they do. They give a list of all the attendees at the end of the conference. They don't care that you know that, but they just don't want you knowing what goes on there. And again, this is a big news reporter admitting, yeah, we're not telling you what goes on there. It's not important. It's only all of the world's top elites that run all the major governments around the world and, control all the central banks and are manipulating global trends. Yeah, you don't need to know what goes on. It doesn't concern you. We only pick your pockets and get you to fund everything that they orchestrate and send your kids to fight their phony wars. You don't need to know. It's not the job of the media. Heck, there's no law that says the media has to tell you the truth. We set it up that way, of course. After the June 2000 Bilderberger meeting in Brussels, Belgium, a deliberately vague press release was issued, which ended with this statement. Participants have agreed not to give interviews to the press during the meeting. In contacts with the news media after the conference, it is an established rule that no attribution should be made to individual participants of what was discussed during the meeting. So, in a roundabout way, they're telling you, we're not going to say anything both before or after the meeting about what went on or is going to go on. Anyway, even on the rare occasions, folks, that an honest journalist has desired to report on a Bilderberger conference, such a thing was soon found out to be impossible. In 1971, for example, the Bilderberger conference for that year took place at the Lawrence Rockefeller Woodstock Inn in Woodstock, Vermont. Speaking of this upcoming conference, the Rutland, Vermont Herald reported in its April 20th issue, and I quote, "A rather tight lid of secrecy is being kept on the conference. The Woodstock Inn will apparently be sealed up like Fort Knox. No press coverage will be allowed, with the exception of issuing a statement at the end of the meeting, which, as always, of course, revealed absolutely nothing. The statement is usually something to the effect that, yes, all the elites met here this week. We had a great time. We all got drunk. And have a nice day." Unbelievable, folks. Security. Police officers on your payroll are sent there to protect the elites from your prying ears and eyes, making sure that you don't know what they're up to. Can you freaking believe this? Your tax dollars pay these thugs, whose job it is, or is supposed to be, to protect and serve the public. Remember those days? Remember that motto? And there they are, protecting the interest of the elites that are selling you out and trashing your interests. Man, it's just unbelievable. Unfreaking believable. And we're supposed to be the most advanced species on the planet. You won't find anything like this in any other species on planet Earth. It's only the advanced human species that plays this kind of sleazy, traitorous, sellout game. Try to get a lion to guard the interests of the leopard at the expense of all the other lions in his pack. You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. Animals have more intelligence and, more scruples than the human species of animals. That's your real animals for you. I think we'd be far safer let loose in a lion's cage than on Wall Street or the streets of Washington. Bunch of scum. Anyway, at this time, it's appropriate to take a a look at a quote from former Georgetown professor Carol Quigley. In his book, what's the name of his book? Isn't this awful? I'm getting senile, folks. Carol Quigley, he has a couple books, but I don't have the book listed here. Oh, come on, this is Tragedy and Hope. There we go. See, I'm not totally senile yet. Maybe tomorrow, but not today. Tragedy and Hope, guys. This book is a classic. If you don't have it, you need to get it. It's huge. It's over 1,000 pages long, but it's one of the best books to prove this conspiracy for world government, because this guy was actually in favor of it. So he's not some crazed conspiracy nut. He was an insider. He examined the papers of the Council on Foreign Relations for a couple years, and at the end, he produced this book as a result, exposing the conspiracy as an insider. Anyway, I'll read this interesting quote when we get back. Stick with us. All right, guys. Back on Truth Hurts Radio. We actually got a caller just called in, my buddy Michael Anthony over in New York. It's the herbalist guy that you hear on the commercial ad I do for him. In fact, I'm going to have him as a guest next Thursday. You don't want to miss that. He's going to be on for the full 2 hours. We're going to be talking about all kinds of interesting stuff. Anyway, welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, good morning, Charlie. Just enjoying the show, pal. I just wanted to chime in with how you were citing David Rockefeller's memoirs that they get together secretly, and the media has kept the meeting secret, so the public has no idea what they're discussing. Yet, I just want to say and emphasize, there is no conspiracy here. We can all go back to sleep. It's okay. They are not conspiring towards anything.
Right. Stop being paranoid, you silly people, you.
That's right. And he mentioned we're more sophisticated now for their New World Order, so I guess we're so much more sophisticated modern man that we're all willing to be dupes, to be slaves and chattel to an elite few running the whole world.
Yeah, and, he cited Time Magazine as one of the ones being cooperative. So we know we can trust Time Magazine. Time Magazine just told us a few months ago when they had Bernanke on the front cover, they gave him the Man of the Year award, that what he did for us with the bailout was a good thing. We just don't see it right now, but in the long run, we'll see it, that it was a good thing for us. Just like when FDR raped and pillaged us of our privately owned gold back in 1933. We still haven't seen it yet, but someday we'll see it was a good thing.
Yes, Charlie, absolutely, because they dig the hole so deep since FDR that we're in such debt that eventually, one day, when we climb out of that hole after much sweat and toil and great off, at that point in time, we'll realize how good it all was, climbing out of that deep, deep hole that went all the way to commie China, that these traders in Washington, D.C. have dug for us. Yes, Charlie, we'll see it eventually, sure.
And I don't know about you, Michael, but I'm looking forward to the next war that they get us involved in. I can't wait to see more of our kids die and come home with depleted uranium-induced cancer tumors and, all kinds of fun, neat stuff like that. Increase our debt more. This is great. We should just love this stuff.
Sure, tax innocent people in other countries because they're threatening us from a great distance with technologies they don't even possess. That's right, Charlie. War is good, Charlie. War is good. It's Christian, too, by the way. Very Christian.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, if you're having trouble enjoying this, folks, just pop a few Prozac or some Ritalin or something, or any other dope of your choice, and I'm sure you'll be able to see the light. And you'll just be able to sit back while you soil your diapers and drool on yourself and enjoy it. Is the ultimate April Fool's joke. Really, go ahead, Mike.
So true. Charlie, I'll just wrap up by saying that I am really disappointed that our military is not astute enough. Now, maybe I'm wrong because I don't have a lot of connections with those guys. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are astute. I did hear, I think it was through Don Nikoloff recently, that they did assassinate a lot of our military brass quietly that were not going to cooperate with the Rockefeller New World Order. And so that there might be a lot of validity to that. I just hope our military does wake up and realize what's going on here, that we're all being used by these SOBs and the traitors in Washington, D.C., and I'm living for the day, pal, when they're all held accountable. We hold them for high treason, we convict them for high treason and high crimes against our country, and we make sure they pay the ultimate penalty, which is death and preferably hanging from high limbs with the Star-Spangled Banner blasting right behind their eardrums. That's the last thing they'll hear as they do the ear dance on their way out.
Well, I'm not a man of violence, but you know what? I got my tickets reserved, front row seats for that one.
Amen, Charlie. And that's coming from a strict vegetarian that doesn't harm a fly. But when it comes to traitors and racketeers that destroy so many lives here in our country and around the world, as well as sell out our country and mock God and His Holy Son. That's all they do as Luciferians. They mock God and His Holy Son, Jesus the Christ. And because of that, I have no tolerance for that. I have no problem getting them in court, proving they're traitors, and giving them the appropriate penalty that the Founding Fathers demanded. So with that, pal, I just want to say God bless. Keep up the great work. I'll catch you later, Charlie.
Okay, we'll see you next Thursday, Mike.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for the call. Yep. Yeah, folks, their crimes are through the roof. It's unbelievable. What they've gotten away with, quite frankly, you couldn't even fathom a punishment adequate enough to reward them for what they've done. I mean, they have wreaked misery and destruction and havoc all over the planet. They've stolen people's homes, stolen their jobs, put them in debt, devaluated their currency. It's just created war after war after war. You look at all the millions of people. How many times have you heard about how the 20th century was the century of war? More people died in the 20th century. Well, yeah, it's true. But at whose hand? Who was responsible for all of these wars and putting all these tyrants in power that killed all these people? It's these elite globalist bastards. That's who. Their crimes are absolutely incomprehensible. You can't even wrap your head around it. And that doesn't even include all of the inoculations with their poisons and the crap that they're putting in your food, causing disease to spread rapidly. You know, the creation of the AIDS virus and the bird flu fiasco and swine flu and on and on and on and on and on. Their weather modification technology screwing up the planet. Hey! Look what they're doing. Look what they're getting away with. And most people, again, we pride ourselves in being the most intelligent animal on the planet. We're the most stupid. The most sleazy. If it's not people pulling off crimes like this, it's others who wouldn't ordinarily approve of this stuff, but do because they're too darn stupid to figure it out. So take your pick. You know, stupidity is almost as dangerous as an outright tyrant, because your apathy facilitates their crimes, folks. Not you listeners, but, you know, the public in general. It's just phenomenal. It blows my mind. I've been studying this stuff for years, and I still can't fathom that I'm living in this kind of world. I can't believe it. There's days I wake up, you feel refreshed, you roll over, you stretch, and then you remember, oh, crap, I'm living in a tyrannical system of government right now. You know, it hits you. It's like, oh, you hope you're going to wake up and think that was all just a bad dream, and, oh, thank God, I don't really live in that kind of world. Man, I don't care how many jalapenos you eat before bed. You couldn't have a nightmare that could come anywhere as close to the horrific nature of the reality that we deal with on a daily basis. You couldn't have a nightmare that could mimic this. Hollywood couldn't dream up something this crazy. And yet it's reality. And, I don't know what frustrates me more, the fact that these scumbags are doing what they do, or the fact that the general population is letting them do it. And, it's not just in this country. The bulk of their crimes are committed by this government, sure, here and abroad, but it's the entire global population, really. They're letting these elites across the board get away with this stuff on a global scale. It's unbelievable. Look at the lies that they're propagating, that they're pawning off on us. And for the most part, people around the world are falling for it, or they're not doing anything about it. So they're just going to sit there and take it 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 until finally one day they wake up, but by then it's too late because the system is too dug in. We're almost there now, folks. A point where we're not going to be able to do anything about it because they got their clutches sunk too deep into our hides, and there's no stopping them unless you resort to the ultimate, which is going to be massive, massive bloodshed. I was interviewed on a show the other day out in Colorado, it was, and we talked about this. They asked me, do you think there's any hope? I said, yeah, if you could wake everybody up and get them on the same page, of course there's hope. If you could coordinate a national strike, you could stop them through peaceful means. Absolutely. We could do it right now. If you could get everybody to wake up and say, hey, what's going on? This is an outrage. Look what's happening here. We're not going to put up with this anymore. We're not going to grease the gears of their machine anymore. We're not going to work. You would shut the government down and the corporations that run the government. That would be it. You'd have them at their knees begging for mercy. They couldn't even handle one day of that, folks. We could go a lot longer without them than they could go without us. They'd be begging us, okay, what are your demands? Oh, we'll do anything. They're not happy with the fact that they've been exploiting us for decades on end now, sucking off of us every day we go to work, living off of our labor and living a luxurious, exorbitant lifestyle. No, that's not enough for them. They always want more, more, more. All right, guys. Wow, we're already into the final segment for the first hour. Let's see if I can finish these notes up. I got a couple more pages, and then I got another topic I want to go on to here. I started, before Mike had called in, I started to cite this quote from Carroll Quigley in his book, Tragedy and Hope. Let me go ahead with that now. Here's what he said. The powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This was written back in the 60s, folks, and here we are. Anyway, this system was to be controlled in a feudalistic fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert, in secret, by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences, like the Bilderberger conferences that we were just talking about. There you go. Consolidating the wealth of the world, i.e. stealing it from the masses, hoarding it in their hands. I mean, this is what we're seeing. The same veil of secrecy upheld by the Bilderbergers, as you might expect, is also embraced by the Council on Foreign Relations. Compare the following quote with the similar Bilderberger policy of silence that we just made reference to a little while ago. Here's what it says. It would not be in compliance with the organization's non-attribution role for a meeting participant, A, to publish a speaker's statement in attributed form in a newspaper, B, to repeat it on television or radio or on a speaker's platform or in a classroom, or C, to go beyond a memo of limited circulation by distributing the attributed statement to a company or government or agency newsletter. A meeting participant is forbidden knowingly to transmit the attributed statement to a newspaper reporter or other such person who is likely to publish it in a public medium. The essence of the rule is simple enough. Participants in council meetings should not pass along an attributed statement in circumstances where there is substantial risk that it'll promptly be widely circulated or published. Could they make it any more clear? This is what they're all about, folks. Council on Foreign Relations, whose members are all the elites, like the Bilderbergs. But the CFR is, an American branch, if you will. Although a good many CFR members are in fact Bilderbergers. But anyway, The same idea. It's comprised of the elites in banking and business and government, entertainment, you name it. And here they are stating emphatically in no uncertain terms, keep your mouths shut. Nothing we discuss is to be, leaked out to the public. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is their, official policy. You now see why these organizations are called secret societies. They obviously have a lot to hide, folks. Incidentally, the globalists also fund and control our entertainment media. That should be quite obvious. Which have much to do with the moral breakdown in this country, something they're all about. And so you might ask, well, why would they want to deprive us of our national moral standards? The answer is summed up in the following quote from an article that appeared in Psychiatry magazine back in 1946. Listen to what they said. The reinterpretation and eventual eradication of the concepts of right and wrong is the belated objective for charting changes in human behavior. Freedom from moralities means to be free from outmoded types of loyalties. So there's a definite, concerted, deliberate effort here to destroy morality, and they've done that through their control they have over our entertainment media as well as our news media. There isn't anything they don't have their fingers in, folks. Let's look at, I'll close this discussion with a few disturbing quotes. This one, let's see, where does this one come from? This is from Edward Herman, Professor Emeritus of Finance at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And here's what he has to say. Pravda and Izvestia, propaganda newspapers of the former Soviet Union, would have been hard-pressed to surpass the American media in their subservience to the official agenda. They have abandoned the notion of objectivity or even the idea of providing a public space where problems are discussed and debated. It's a scandal that reveals the existence of a system of propaganda, not of serious media so essential in a democratic society. There you go. Pravda would blush, according to this author. The old Pravda. The Pravda today, talks a lot more truth than our media does. Pravda has had several articles about 9/11 being an inside job. You didn't see that in our media. Dear God in heaven. Can you believe this? We were told how evil Pravda was, a propaganda machine. Well, yeah, it was, but not anymore. We got the propaganda machines today, folks. Richard Nixon, I actually made reference to this quote a few shows ago. Richard Nixon, in his book, The Real War, came out in 1980. Listen to what he said. The nation's immediate problem is that while the common man fights America's wars, the intellectual elite sets its agenda. He's absolutely right here, guys. Today, whether the West lives or dies is in the hands of its new power elite, those who set the terms of public debate, who manipulate the symbols, who decide whether nations or leaders will be depicted on 100 million television sets as good or bad. This power elite sets the limits of the possible for presidents and Congress. It molds the impressions that move the nation or that mire it. Absolutely. Man could not have been more correct. Here's another one. This is from Catherine Graham, CFR member and former chairman of the board of the Washington Post. Here's what she said. There are some things the general public does not need to know and shouldn't know. I believe democracy flourishes when the government can take legitimate steps to keep its secrets and when the press can decide whether to print what it knows. There you go, expressing very similar sentiments to some quotes I read yesterday. They all are saying this. These arrogant scoundrels actually think that they have the right to lie to you, and it's too bad if you don't like it. Here's another one. This is from Sam Donaldson, He said, the press traditionally sides with authority and the establishment. He actually made that admission, folks. And again, he's right. He's right. It's just that the American public hasn't caught up to these guys admitting this. Everybody else has. They're in denial, but yet the elites themselves, the ones at the top rungs of the ladder, are admitting the very thing that the conspiracy nuts have been trying to warn them about all along. Tom Fenton, author of Bad News, had this to say: politicians spin the truth. That is what they do for a living. The news media's job is supposed to be unscrambling that spin, separating truth from lies, but it's just not working anymore. The public simply doesn't know what's going on much of the time. They don't know who to trust and what to believe. The one thing the public does seem to agree on more and more consistently, alas, is that the news media can't be fully trusted. Can't be trusted at all. They need to take it a step higher than that. Anyway, here's another quote. This is from Curtis B. Dahl, the author of FDR, My Exploited Father-in-Law. Very interesting book. Anyway, here's what he said. The creators of false images are operating today full time, festooning about the White House and on Capitol Hill, busy creating managed news, even withholding some news. All right, guys, I'll stop there. I got a couple more quotes, but I won't finish those. You can request the transcript. When we get back, I'm going to go off onto another interesting subject. You don't want to miss it. Stick with us. Be right back. All right, guys, welcome back. Into our second hour here. I just remembered this during the break. I meant to mention this before. Almost 2 weeks ago, in fact, tomorrow it'll be 2 weeks, since I had Charles Bonner on. Some of you might remember him. He's the author of the book, The Bracelet, wherein he exposes the international child sex slave trade. Very interesting guy. We had a few discussions during the breaks. He's a 9/11 truther. Actually, I think he did mention that on air, come to think of it. Yeah, he did at toward the end of the show. He said that, I guess, obviously he heard, the commercials for my 9/11 book. And so he said, your book sounds very interesting. I'll have to get it. He says, you're on the right track with that one. That was pretty interesting. I'm finding this a lot, folks. Michael Parenti, I mentioned him before. He's another one. He was a former professor at, I think, Berkeley. Yeah, he taught at Berkeley. A few other prestigious colleges, universities as well. He calls himself a recovering academic. There's a lot of them out there who know what's going on. They might not be so vocal about it, and for obvious reasons. Perhaps they're not into having a short lifespan, but they do know what's going on, and on occasion, at appropriate times, they do speak out. Anyway, let's go on to a different topic. We're going to get off the sleazy politics here for a while. I like to do that from time to time. On numerous occasions on this show, I've discussed a concept called diffusionism, a historical school of thought, which claims, and I agree with it for good reason, there's plenty of evidence to back it up, claims that ancient cultures from, old world cultures from across the Atlantic, the Pacific, had reached the Americas long before Columbus. And I mentioned how I have various shows dealing with this subject that I would be doing. And this is one example today. I've got one show pretty much for every ancient culture, documenting in detail how they had reached the Americas. By the way, this information is available, most of it anyway, in my book, An Alternative View of the Distant Past. That's not mentioned in my commercial. I have quite a few books, actually. I only mentioned the New World Disorder book and the 9/11 book, but I've got several others available on Amazon.com. And so in that book, you'll find this information along with a whole lot of other interesting information. But one whole section of the book deals with this issue. And so today what we'll be looking at is the Babylonians having reached American shores long before Columbus. I plan to have some guests on dealing with the subject in the future. Gunnar Thompson is one. Some of you might know him. He's a well-known author from that school of thought. And he's written some very good books. American Discovery is one. I believe it's back in print, by the way. It was out of print for a while. I highly recommend it. Excellent, excellent book. Anyway, guys, short break, and then I'll launch into this discussion when we get back. Very interesting stuff. You don't want to miss it. Be right back. All right, guys, welcome back. I've kind of already set the pace for this discussion on previous shows. You know, I've talked about how the ancients weren't a bunch of ignoramuses, like we've been told. You know, they want us to believe the further back you go in history, the more primitive man was. It's absolutely ridiculous. We have primitive cultures here on the planet today. And we could fathom archaeologists, 1,000 years from now, digging up remains of some of these primitive cultures that live in, remote areas of the Amazon or in the Congo. And they could conclude that, man who lived 1,000 years ago was very primitive. That's what we're dealing with here. These jokester archaeologists will dig up some remote colony remains, and that lived in a cave. And across the board, that's it. Everybody who lived in this period was very primitive. These were the dregs of society, for crying out loud. It's so ridiculous. A joke. And these are supposed to be some of the most learned, educated men on the planet. They're idiots. But, a lot of them are willful idiots. Because, like everything else, they want us dumbed down about ancient history, too, folks. They want us dumbed down about a whole lot of things. Sometimes they're just idiots. They don't know what they're talking about. Other times, the elite, professors in academia, they know they're pawning lies off. They don't care. They're paid well to do it. But in any case, whether they're told deliberately or ignorantly, they're still lies nonetheless. The ancients were highly advanced, and they were certainly capable of competently traversing the Atlantic and or the Pacific to reach the Americas, and did reach the Americas in ancient times. The evidence for that is over-flippin'-whelming. If you miss out on that, you're missing out on a very fascinating and important part of your heritage, of history. Anyway, so today we're going to be focusing, and by the way, as I mentioned before, coming across the Atlantic and the Pacific, folks, especially if you have a sailboat, doesn't require an advanced knowledge of shipping and the stars, astronomy, and whatnot. You don't need to have an understanding of seafaring techniques. You don't need to be a maritime expert. You can basically take a 3-month-long nap and just sail into one of the natural trade winds that will carry you right across the Pacific or the Atlantic. And there's routes that will take you back as well. There's these circular belts, especially in the equatorial regions, that will actually carry you here without you having to navigate. The trade winds will just carry you naturally. So, I mean, to imply that they weren't here, they weren't capable of reaching here, is just ridiculous. Just because some idiots in the Dark Ages had these bizarre superstitions that they were going to sail off the edge of the earth, doesn't mean the ancients were held back by these inhibitions. They knew the earth was round, by the way. That's why they call it the Dark Ages. Man slipped back. Anyway, we're going to focus specifically today on ancient Babylon. Did the Babylonians reach the Americas in ancient times? Yes, they did, and the evidence for that is overwhelming, as we'll see. On future shows, I'll scatter them, here and there. But on other occasions, I'll be doing shows on ancient China, ancient India, the Celts, you name it. They were all here at one time or other. Anyway, like the ancient people of China and India, those of Sumeria and Babylon had also written about apparent visits to the Americas in the distant past. As Gunnar Thompson tells us in his book, American Discovery, he said, Sumerian tablets of the 3rd to 4th millennium BC tell of voyages beyond the Western Sea, i.e. the Atlantic, and establishment of colonies in the distant land, i.e. America. What else could it be? Sumerian tablets also make frequent reference to the Lake of Manu, sometimes called Cloud Lake, or Lake in the Clouds, which was said to be in the mountains of the sunset, or in the sunset land, the land in the direction of the sunset, the land toward the west, across the Atlantic. Could this be describing anything else, folks? But Lake Titicaca, high up in the Andes, the lake in the mountains, which to the Sumerians truly was in the sunset land, a land far to the west. I would say so. What else could it be? On the other side of the Atlantic, the Peruvians have a legend that tells of how their distant ancestors were migrants that came from the sunrise across the water. Again, the Atlantic. Here we have two ancient legends talking about transoceanic voyages. The Sumerians talked about them going to this great land across the Western Sea, and about this lake in this big mountain, Mount Manu, right? And now we have the Peruvians who have an ancient legend that talks of their ancestors coming from the east across the Great Sea. It's obvious. But the question is, did the Babylonians and the Sumerians actually have seaworthy ships that were capable of such long transoceanic voyages? That's the question. Mainstream academia would have us believe no, but let's take a close look here. The Babylonians, folks, constructed an extensive overseas trade network with East Africans and Hindus in the 3rd millennium BC, confirmation of which has been made from cuneiform inscriptions and ceramic trade goods found at various archaeological sites throughout these regions. The Babylonian vessels used in these ancient transoceanic trading excursions were made from reed bundles wrapped with hemp ropes and covered in a tar-like substance known as bitumen. They were large enough to carry up to 28 tons of trade goods and reached lengths of over 100 feet. These boats were often reinforced with bamboo poles and trunks of palm trees. Certainly ships of this sort were capable of journeying across the Atlantic to the New World. What's the problem? You've got, what was his name? Thor Heyerdahl, for example, who traversed the Atlantic and the Pacific in boats far less seaworthy than that. His Kon-Tiki and his Ra, too. He was able to make major transoceanic, transatlantic, trans-Pacific journeys in small little rafts, for crying out loud. So certainly these much more seaworthy boats of the ancient Babylonians and Sumerians were capable of making such journeys. So, while you'll have mainstream academia laughing at the diffusionists saying, oh, that's silly, these ancient cultures reaching the Americas before Columbus, well, I laugh back at them for their foolish ignorance to think that the ancients weren't capable of this. They had seaworthy vessels. They were highly competent sea captains. Give me a flippin' break. And then when you look at the archaeological evidence, you think that would clinch the case. No, they ignore it. They suppress it. All right, guys, we'll pick up with this discussion when we get back. Stick with us. Okay, guys. We've looked at the shipbuilding technology of the Babylonians. They certainly, and the Sumerians, they certainly had the capability of reaching here. They had seaworthy boats. And we know that their ancient legends talked about having come across the Great Sea to the west. And we have a legend from the ancient Peruvians talking about their ancestors coming from the Great Sea to the east, coming across the Atlantic. So, we have all of that evidence. But what about the physical evidence? Do we actually have archaeological evidence that the Babylonians/Sumerians had reached the Americas in ancient times. Absolutely. So that's where we're going to be going next here. At a burial site in Huayhuaca, Peru, gold foil and lapis lazuli beads were uncovered that date back to the 16th century BC, the exact same time that the Babylonians were engaged in ocean-bound trading with these very types of items. Other connections between Peru and Babylon from this same time include divination from entrails. Peruvians had practiced this. Conical clay pegs placed in the hollow spaces between foundation stones of buildings. The Peruvians practiced this, as did the Babylonians. I actually had one of those in my collection a number of years ago, and like a fool, I sold it. And I've regretted it ever since, because now you almost can't find cuneiform artifacts anymore. It's very difficult to get them. That was a real stupid move on my part. It was a nice, hand-sized clay cuneiform artifact. It was pretty neat. Anyway, but what are the chances that the Peruvians would have independently developed these innovations on their own? I mean, it's ridiculous. They used clay cones and put them in the hollows of the, they'd have 4 stones, to mark the cornerstones of their buildings. The Babylonians built their buildings the same way. There would be a hollow in these 4 square arranged stones, arranged in a square, and would fill them with these clay cones that would have incantations written on them, appealing to the gods to protect the building from harm or whatever. So the Babylonians practiced it, the Peruvians practiced it. Obviously, this indicates cultural interaction, an exchange of cultural practices, ideals. Again, divination from entrails. And also unique braided beard patterns of royal figures. Don't forget, by the way, that Native Americans don't even grow beards. And yet we have found carvings in Peru of individuals with beards who do not look like Native Americans at all. They look like, they're from the Far East. The facial features, but particularly the beards. The beards are braided in some of these carvings in Peru, just like the Sumerian kings had braided beards. So what are the chances of these striking similarities having come about, independently, by chance? It's ridiculous. For any one of these to have occurred singularly would be, pretty hard to fathom as a result of random chance, coincidence. But when you look at all of these collectively, and there's other similarities too we'll talk about. Anyway, a goddess was featured in Babylonian art that held a vase with flowing streams of liquid coming out of its left and right sides. This exact same scene was found in Zapotec art in Mexico. A goddess holding this vessel, a vase or whatever, with flowing streams of water coming out from either side. It had some mystical meaning to it, the water of life or whatever. But what are the chances that on either side of the Atlantic you would have this symbol appearing in religious art, coincidentally, by chance? No, there was a cultural exchange, obviously. It was a common custom in both Assyria and Mexico for dignitaries to be shaded from the sun by an attendant holding an umbrella over his head. This scene is often portrayed in ancient artworks on both sides of the Atlantic. And by the way, in both cases, the umbrella looks precisely the same on both sides of the Atlantic. the same exact style. So not only did they both have attendants holding umbrellas over them on both sides, the royalty, but the umbrellas were made in the same fashion, with reeds. Anyway, patterns painted on Mesopotamian pottery. Often, I really got to get my phone out of here when I do a live show. Sorry about that, folks. I keep forgetting. Patterns painted on Mesopotamian pottery often very closely match those painted on ancient American pottery. For example, one pottery piece from Elam in modern-day Iran perfectly matches a pattern found on a pottery item from northwestern Argentina. The design involves intermittent squares formed by 2 black and 2 white triangles with their apexes pointed in toward the center, with multiple vertical lines separating each square. In other words, these patterns are very detailed. It's not like, oh, look at that, they both put triangles on their pottery. Something like that you could never say was a result of diffusion. Triangles are common all over the world, but when you have triangles arranged in the same way, surrounded by these parallel line patterns going in the same direction in the same exact fashion, now you have something very precise, and the chances of that being the result of, random coincidence, it's nothing short of laughable. But this is what mainstream academia wants us to believe. It's unbelievable. It's like 9/11. There's so many bizarre coincidences. There's just too many to write off. And yet that's exactly what they want us to do. They want us to be coincidence theorists. They'll laugh at us for being conspiracy theorists, but what they're proposing is a bizarre, impossible stream of coincidences that you just can't write off as, by chance. Anyway, I see we got a caller coming in, Brian in Arizona. So let me go to him at this time. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Oh, hi. Well, I just got up and I'm watching the liars over at Fox News on TV, and they were just showing where the unemployment was 12.8% in North Carolina. Well, then they segued that into a story about a 42-year-old guy. He's worked somewhere for 17 years, and they show him, and he's sitting at a chair at a bench in front of some kind of a circuit board, and he's going through training. And they said, well, if it wasn't for Obama, this man wouldn't have been able to go through job training, through this school. And he sits there and he says, well, yeah, I have a lot of faith in the current, this is what killed me. I have a lot of faith in the current administration that's around. I mean, this is the most criminal organization in power since the beginning of time, and either this was totally scripted and a lie, or we have the stupidest people in America.
I tell you what, we're going to cut to a break. You want to hold on? Hold on, we're going to cut to a break. Yeah, we'll be right back, folks. All right, guys, welcome back to True Church Radio. Got Brian on the line here. Yeah, Brian, you sound disappointed, but, let's face it, Fox is doing what they do best. Let's cheer them on. They do such a good job, don't they? Nobody does it better. I mean, come on. They're doing what only they know how to do.
Well, the whole 9/11 was so blatant and obvious, but to come on, I mean, half the time they sit on there and they talk, they kind of badmouth Obama a little bit because they have to, because
the left-right.
I think they and CNN are the two biggest. Yeah, well, they and CNN are the two biggest people behind Tea parties and pushing that movement to sidetrack the people from the real truth, the people like you guys and Alex Jones. And I was doing work for an attorney yesterday, and we got on the subject of 9/11, and the guy just laughed. And I just, you're one of those, I said, you mean conspiracy factoid people? Is that what I am, a conspiracy factoid people? And they just laugh at you. And then you start telling them about Vornado Realty Capital and how they were outbid by Larry Silverstein. And these douchebags don't even know that the buildings were leased out about a month before they came, or 6 weeks before they came down. They couldn't even tell you that the New York Port Authority owned them, you know.
Yeah, they laugh at you, but they don't know anything about what happened that day. You know, you ask them, can you name even one of the numbers of flights or one of the alleged hijackers? Or they can't tell you anything about it.
No. And they can't tell you about the history of the building. They don't even know that the EPA went in there in 97 and did a report and found out because of the dirty air syndrome and due to the weakening steel, you see that had a weakening aluminum. It had an aluminum over steel facade framework.
Right.
And what was happening is as they blew in the heavy winds, the bolts were becoming loose due to galvanic corrosioning where the aluminum, they never tested aluminum next to steel over time. And what happened was the aluminum started to corrode and the bolts became loose.
Exactly. It's just,
that's why the buildings were so dangerous.
Crazy stuff. Anyway, I wish you'd called in the first half of the show when I was talking about the media control and everything. Have you been listening to the discussion about diffusionism? Did you have any comments on that? Or?
Well, no, and I just have to either hit 1 or hit 2. 1 allows you to talk, and 2 allows you to hear the show. And I'm in Arizona. I'm on a different time zone, so I just kind of woke up and started. I just punched in. Usually, I listen to the host, and then I can chime in. So no, I didn't hear the first hour. No.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, because that's what I was talking about. Is the media control, and it's incredible. It's primarily because of them scoundrels that. What's that?
Had I called in the first hour, I would not have been able to tell you what I had just seen on Fox News.
Oh, that's true too.
Literally, a 42-year-old guy sitting there playing with a circuit board telling me he has a lot of faith in the current administration. And I think either they're really dumb in North Carolina or they're dumb all across the country.
Well, I have faith in them too. I hope you do. I have faith that they're going to continue to screw us over. Absolute confidence.
And faith that they might even, you know who I think they're going to try to reelect next time? Palin. They're setting the stage with her with the Tea Party movement.
You know, aside from her corruption, I just couldn't stand 4 years of listening to her crap. Aside from the corruption, she's just a bimbo of bimbos. I just can't stand the woman and her phony Christian hypocrisy. Shut up. We'll crawl back
the only thing she has is, I tell you, Dave Letterman put it well. She does have that slutty flight attendant appeal, though.
Yeah, well, that's all she's got, and that's what they were bargaining on. It's ridiculous. And that's what they'll bargain on if they do, try to get her in. They'll, they don't try to get anybody in. If they want them in, they're going to get in. But they'll just play on that.
Well, yeah, every Johnny Six-Pack who's out of work collecting unemployment will have something good to look at.
Yeah, right. Stupid. That's the American mentality.
All right, adios.
Okay, thanks for the call, Brian.
Bye.
Oh, it's crazy. Our wonderful media. Anyway, let's get back into this discussion here. And, if I don't get around to finishing the notes here, I'll pick it up tomorrow. This is great stuff. And as always, if anybody wants transcripts, just email me, truthhurtsradio@AOL.com. Spell Hertz, Hertz. And I'll send that off to you. I mentioned before, this triangular pattern of on pottery common to the Americas and to the Assyrians, which contains, these parallel lines going the same direction, the same pattern. It's very precise. What are the chances of that occurring, coincidentally, without connections? It's ridiculous. But this is what mainstream academia wants us to believe. Here's another example of pottery patterns held in common between Mesopotamia and the Americas. We have frequently this repeating stepped pyramid motif, such as what is found on a pot from Assur in an ancient Assyrian city, and in El Salvador. In both of these examples, we find that even the number of steps on the pyramids, 3, is the same. You have this repeating pattern of these, like 3 stepped pyramids, one after another, going all the way around the rim of the bowl. You see this with the same number of steps. You see this again in El Salvador and in ancient Assur, an Assyrian city. What are the chances of this, folks? The pt2 cross was a common symbol in Babylonian art. It was used as one of many representations of the sun. It also appeared in ancient Mexico as a symbol for the yearly cycle. It kind of looks like a Maltese cross, kind of. Exactly the same, with a little circle in the center of it. Unbelievable. On both sides of the Atlantic. There's been numerous Sumerian cuneiform inscriptions discovered all over the Americas, but probably the most famous ones have been found in Bolivia. A set of 3 such etchings, known as the pt2 inscriptions, appear on a stone statue. They've been dated to the 2nd millennium BC, and when translated, they read as follows. Distribute the opening of the oracle to mankind. Proclaim that Hutaki's offspring are 2 witnesses esteemed. Act justly now to send forth the oracle to nourish knowledge. Appreciate the cult. All to witness the divine decree. Who knows what this means, but this is how they've been translated. Send forth the soothsayer to capture the speech from the oracle to make clear the ideal norm for living as a guide for mankind. Folks, some of these inscriptions that have been found, I need to add, are written in text that wasn't even known how to be translated until years after they were found. Do you understand what I'm saying? These can't be fakes. When they were found, nobody knew, a lot of these artifacts, when they were found, nobody knew how to translate cuneiform. I think it was only back in, the 1950s when they cracked that code. And yet a lot of these things were found in the 19th century, for crying out loud. Jeez. How could they be forgeries? That's what they claim, a lot of this stuff. Oh, that's forgery. Somebody carved that into the rock. Anyway, this translation goes on. I won't finish it. It's actually kind of nonsensical. But the point is, it's a long script. And it's fully translatable. I mean, it looks like something that was found in the Middle East. If the scholar translating it didn't know better, he would have sworn that this stone he was translating from was actually found in the Middle East instead of the Americas. Anyway, also found in this area was the Fuente Magna bowl, bearing Sumerian inscriptions as well, 2 of which translate thusly: girls take an oath to act justly in this place. This is a favorable oracle of the people. It's some kind of religious ceremonial bowl. Send forth a just divine decree. The charm, meaning the Fuente Magna bowl itself, is full of good. And again, I won't take the time to read this whole translation. I'm looking at it here. It's pretty lengthy. But obviously, we're not dealing with a forgery. This thing is way too long, and it's written without any errors. A forger would always make a slip up or, write something wrong, put a wrong script because of his ignorance, a wrong letter or whatever. But this thing is flawless, written as just like someone from that time, because it was written from someone of that time, someone from across the Atlantic. All right, guys, short break. We'll be right back. All right, guys, we're back. We're in our final segment here for the show. I can't believe how quick the time just flies by here. If trade was carried out between Mesopotamia and the Americas, as we're clearly proposing here today, we would expect there to be similarities in trading customs between the 2 regions in ancient times, and we do indeed find just such similarities. For instance, Indo-Sumerians marked trade goods with personalized cylinder seals for identification purposes, as did the ancient Peruvians and Central Americans, particularly the Olmecs and the Mayas. Such seals were elaborately carved and worn on a necklace on both sides of the Atlantic. They both used cylinder seals carved in similar fashions and worn as jewelry items when they weren't being used for actual, sealing of goods. Unbelievable. A symbol that was used quite heavily in Sumerian and Babylonian art was the birth or life symbol. It was an upside-down U with outward bending curls at the ends. This same symbol is also turned up in numerous places in pre-Columbian art. Particularly the Aztecs had used this in pre-Columbian times. Assuming the Olmecs were indeed visited by Mesopotamians, it would have almost been inevitable for the Olmecs to have incorporated at least some of their deities into their own pantheon. We see this having been done, most definitely, with a goddess whose sculpted image was found in Chalcatzingo, Mexico. This deity is found on a cliff face overlooking an agricultural area of land. And it's seated in the mouth of a shallow cave. It's a female deity, and in her lap she holds a large tablet, while in front of her are spirals of smoke. Outside the cave can be seen great clumps of corn growing as big drops of rainfall, as big drops of rain fall on the corn. This same scene is depicted in Sumerian art, folks, over and over again. So what are the chances of that? It's the same type of deity, the same surroundings. I mean, I'm sorry, but, to say that this is all accidental, all by chance, is nothing short of ridiculous, especially when you take it in context with all these other pieces of evidence we're looking at. Any one of these things singled out by themselves is pretty hard to write off, but when you look at them collectively, how can you conclude otherwise but that we're being lied to by mainstream academia? Of course we are. Anyway, unavoidably, as Mesopotamian trading ships journeyed to the Americas in ancient times, their design would have exerted an influence upon shipbuilding styles of Native Americans. So this is just what we find. In fact, commenting on this very issue, Robert Schoch, a Boston University professor, had this to say: the people who live on the shores of Lake Titicaca preserve a singularly striking artifact that points to a connection with the ancient Middle East. Mesopotamian and Egyptian paintings and inscriptions from the 2nd and 3rd millennia BC show the gods sailing through the heavens in high-bowed, high-stern boats made of reeds tied in tight bundles. And this is just what we see being used in the Americas, in ancient Peru, and even in modern times, they're still being used. In the course of trading, we would also expect terminologies and beliefs to be exchanged between Mesopotamia and the Americas. And our expectations here are met as well. We're not met with disappointment. As a case in point, both Babylonian rulers and Peruvian chiefs were referred to as lords of the four quarters. In addition, the Incan Empire was known as Tahuantinsuyo, or the four quarters of the world. Both Sumerian and Peruvian cultures had a goddess called Mama, and believed in the existence of a sacred mountain with twin peaks where the sun rested at night. You have this on both sides of the Atlantic. The Sumerians called their twin peaks Mashu or Manu, while the Incas had their Machu Picchu. So Mashu and Machu. Incredible. There seems to have been a transmission of funerary customs between these two ocean-separated regions in ancient times. But we find that lapis lazuli, a blue-colored semi-precious stone, and cinnabar were both commonly used in burial rites in Mesopotamia, while the Peruvians used lapis lazuli and the Mayas used cinnabar for the same purpose. What are the chances of this being, by coincidence? Turning to the practice of writing, we see at least one parallel here as well. Both Mesopotamians and Middle Easterners made paper in ancient times, and both coated the writing surface with lime. And this was done in the Americas as well. In the area of mathematics, there was one specific similarity that was common to both these regions in ancient times, the concept of the number 0. No other cultures in ancient times used this number, folks, except the Mayans and the Sumerians. These two parts of the world were also fascinated, even obsessed, with astronomy. They built sophisticated observatories, for example, and maintained meticulous records of eclipses. Both of them also put a heavy emphasis on Venus as an important deity. Public construction projects utilized the same type of vassal labor system in these two vastly separated regions. Robert Schock explains pyramids and other major public work projects in Mesoamerica and the Middle East were constructed with corvée labor, unpaid labor, due from a vassal to his lord. Very, striking parallels there as well. Even in the realm of medicinal procedures, both areas practiced trepanation, which is to open the skull, for surgical purposes. And they both used the same style of trepanation. They would create a crisscrossing pattern looking like a tic-tac-toe board. And then they would remove the middle square piece, but they would go crosswise with two parallel lines going one way and then perpendicularly two lines going the other. So they not only practiced trepanation, but with the same exact cuttings, the same pattern of cuttings, folks. Once again, how can we write this off as chance coincidence? None of this stuff. Ancient Mesopotamians benefited from their American contacts in many ways, particularly in the realm of agriculture. A good example of this is the pineapple, which was originally native to South America alone. Yet an undeniable representation of this fruit has been found on a 9th century BC Assyrian stone mural. This pineapple shows all the expected features endemic to it, clarifying that it could be no other plant. It has a stem with buds, crown with pointed leaves, and the classic diamond-shaped pattern on its skin. Ceramic pineapples have also been found in some ancient Egyptian tombs, and it is to this corner of the ancient world that, there appears to have been most contact in ancient times. So there you go, folks. No question about it. We have evidence of, Mesopotamians being in the Americas, and of course, over in Mesopotamia, we have evidence that they were here in the Americas, bringing back pineapples. How is this evidence ignored? I mean, it's right in your face. It's overwhelming. Again, it's like 9/11. How can people miss this? The evidence is through the roof. All you need to have, folks, is an open mind, and you can see the truth, fighting your nose off. All right, guys.